Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of this movement and the Order of Man podcast. Welcome here. I want to cut through all the BS today. I want to cut through the ads and through the intro. You guys all know what we're doing. If you are new, you can go back and listen to other podcasts. Just make sure you subscribe, leave a rating and review, all that kind of stuff. All right. I want to talk with you about something very important today because this is something that I hear a lot from men. I know a lot of guys are struggling, and what they're struggling with is finding their passion. Finding their passion. There's a lot of men out there who are very, very unhappy with their current work, their current employment, their current life, their current job. If you're anything like me, there was a point in my life where I just felt like, you know what, there's something more for me. I'm made for something more than what I'm currently doing. And I know a lot of you listening feel very much the same way. And so you've adopted this idea, the notion that you should find and follow your passion. I think there's danger in that. Maybe not danger, but I just think it's a misguided idea. I don't think the idea of following your passion or finding your passion is serving you. It's very passive, right? When I hear find your passion, what I think is that at some point in your life, it will just miraculously show up. That you'll be, walking down the road or engaged in your work or doing whatever it is you do, and the clouds will part and the light will shine through and the angels will sing hallelujah, and everything about your path moving forward will be conveniently laid out before you. And that when you find your passion, everything will begin to fall into place. Now, it has not been my experience in my life, and I can attest to that for other very, very successful men. That it hasn't been that way either. And I think when we buy into the notion of the finding your passion, we think that just because we may at some point find something we're excited about, that it should be easy. And what ends up happening is if the path is anything but easy, and it will be, even things you're excited about, the path is not easy, it's not comfortable, that it must not be right. And so what guys do is they'll throw in the towel. They'll be pursuing something, a podcast or a side business or a hustle, if you will. And they'll realize, you know what, like this is hard and it's challenging and there's ups and downs and there's the roller coaster of running a business and trying to grow a business. And because there's so many ups and downs and so many hardships, they'll think, well, it must not be right. And I believe that is one of the greatest dangers with the follow your passion crowd. If you want more information on this, I would definitely look into Cal Newport's work. One book is So Good They Can't Ignore You, and the other is Deep Work. He's got other works as well, but those two books will help illustrate and communicate a little more in depth about what I'm talking about. Guys, finding your passion isn't a passive strategy. It isn't one day you're just going to be walking down the road and everything's going to miraculously work out for you. What I would suggest is that if you are feeling like you're meant and almost destined, like I felt, for something more in your life, then it isn't about finding your passion or discovering your life's purpose or your meaning for being on this spinning rock. It's about stepping into some curiosity. That's it. And I know that isn't as sexy. I know that doesn't sound as great. I know it doesn't conjure up any sort of, grand vision for what your life is supposed to look like. But I'm telling you, if you're curious about something or even remotely interested in something, then you ought to explore it. You owe it to yourself to explore what that interest is. So if it's picking up a guitar, I had a guy reach out just last week, I think I mentioned it on the Ask Me Anything, that he does ice sculptures, which is kind of a unique and interesting thing to be interested in. Whether it's photography or building websites or starting a podcast or getting into mechanics or learning how to hunt or whatever, learning how to paint, whatever the thing is that you're even feeling remotely curious about or interested in, just take one step, guys. All right, so if you're the kind of guy who's listening to this and you're like, man, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt I am meant for something more, and you're wondering how to find it, because that is one of the questions I get quite often is, how do I find my passion? You step into something that you're interested in. That's it. There isn't any other answer that I can give you. You just step into something, one step into something that you're interested in. Let me give you a little bit of backstory with Order of Man. I was doing a podcast for my financial planning practice. This was 6-7 years ago now. And I thought, this would be a great way for me to market and promote my services in this new digital media that I had become aware of. Other people were doing it, but nothing like I wanted to do. And I started by buying an $80 microphone. The Blue Yeti is what it was called. And I recorded basically the first conversation that I would have with new financial planning prospects. And then I would burn it onto CDs. And so I had some professional pictures taken. That was me, a little bit heavier without the beard. That was my life back then. I had these pictures taken. And then I had a designer put together, the logo and the image and everything else. And then I printed them on CD stickers. So I went to Best Buy or wherever I went, Office Max, something like that. And I bought a bunch of CDs. And I recorded basically my first presentation to a potential prospect onto these CDs. And so I burned them onto the CDs. I printed out the labels, stuck the labels on the CDs, and I would hand these out to people. That was my first introduction to ever getting behind a microphone and sharing a message digitally like I am today. And then I thought, well, man, this is actually working. People were handing it around and people were coming in, and I didn't have to sell them on why they should work with me because they had already gone through that. And anybody who came in or reached out to me had already known a little bit what I was about. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do a podcast. I like listening to podcasts. It sounds kind of interesting to me. And I recorded roughly 20 episodes of a podcast called Wealth Anatomy, which was a podcast designed to give medical professionals, so I had physicians, chiropractors, veterinarians, dentists, the information they needed to build wealth and pay off debt and secure their finances. And I thought to myself, no self-respecting, highly educated, intelligent doctor is ever going to reach out to me because they happen to hear some guy on a podcast. And I'll never forget it. There was a pediatric physician from Pennsylvania, and he reaches out to me and he says, hey, he calls my office. He says, hey, I need disability insurance. And I said, okay, well, that's, something we can certainly help you with. That's one of the things that we do. And tell me a little bit about what you're looking for and how I can help. And he rattles off a list to me of all of the features that he needed with his disability insurance. Now, I don't know about you, but most people don't know anything about disability insurance. So for this doctor to give me a laundry list of items or features that he needed within his disability insurance was unique. It was unique to say the least. And I asked him, I said, most doctors don't really know this much about disability insurance. It sounds like you're pretty well versed. Have you been researching? Have you been shopping around? And he said, and this is the thing this was a light bulb moment for me. He said, no, I just listened to your podcast about disability insurance and I just wrote down everything that I needed. And so I figured I'd just give you a call and have you help me with it. And that to me was like a switch, like, oh my goodness, this podcasting thing actually works. This is a great marketing strategy. So I did the podcast, like I said, about 25 episodes and realized fairly quickly that I love the medium of podcasting. I loved doing what I'm doing now. I loved having the interviews. It was just a very fascinating thing for me. But I didn't want to continue to have that same conversation that I've been having over the past roughly 9-10 years at that point. So I decided along the way that I was very interested in the concept of masculinity. Not that I wanted to eventually build Order of Man or some sort of global organization that would help hundreds of thousands, if not millions of men across the planet, which is what we're doing now. That wasn't my intention. That wasn't my quote unquote passion. I just wanted to have good conversations with men that I admired and respected. And I thought, man, this would be like free coaching for me because I was very interested in becoming a better father, a more engaged husband, obviously running my financial planning practice and business at the time. I was very interested in that. And I thought, man, there's these men that I admire and respect. I can do a podcast and interview these guys, but what would be in it for them? Well, I guess I could do a podcast and just broadcast our conversation. So it'd be like one-on-one coaching for me. I was the biggest recipient of this. And then in exchange, I would broadcast it to an audience that, frankly, I didn't have at that time. I think our first podcast we ever did with Order of Man it must have had less than 100 downloads for that podcast. And I realized very, very quickly I was onto something. It took me 6 or 7 months to start making any sort of money doing the podcast, Order of Man podcast, that is. I was still doing my financial planning practice. But like I said, I wasn't searching for a passion. That wasn't what Order of Man was all about. People think that, you're so lucky you found this thing that you were passionate about. Guys, I wasn't passionate about it. It was just interesting to me. And it was selfish, quite honestly. I just wanted to improve my own life. So I did this podcast. And again, very quickly realized we were onto something. We grew the Facebook group and social media accounts were growing, and men were really resonating with what it is we were doing, which I did not fully anticipate or expect. My wife comes to me. This was about 5 or 6 months into the Order of Man journey, which at the time was just a hobby. And she said, Ryan, I really appreciate what you're doing with Order of Man. It seems like you're happy and you're fulfilled, and it seems like it's exciting and fulfilling to you. But in all reality, you're doing less of your financial planning practice and more of Order of Man. And, it's detracting from our family household income. And she wasn't wrong. It was detracting from the income. And she said to me, I remember this vividly. She said, so I would think you probably either need to scale it back so you can focus on your financial planning practice or find a way to make some money. And I remember saying to her, well, I'm not scaling this back. If anything, I'm doubling down. Again, not following my passion, just the next step. What can I do to take this to the next level? So I was listening to a podcast. I think it was with Pat Flynn, and I can't remember who his guest was, but they were talking about starting a course. And that's what I did. I started the Iron Council at that time. This was in November of 2015, so it must have been about 6-7 months after we had launched the Order of Men podcast. Again, the next step. That's all it is, guys. No passion here, just like the next step. What do you do? So I started this. I had 12 open spots. I charged $100, and we filled up those spots overnight. Had 1,000 guys in our Facebook group, filled it up overnight. And again, light bulb moment for me. Oh my goodness, I can actually make money. It wasn't a lot of money. It was $1,200, right? But I can actually make money doing this. Another light bulb moment for me. We get about 60 days into our 90-day Iron Council program, and the guys are like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess we can just open it up indefinitely. And we got to about 80 to 100 members very, very quickly when we opened it up. Very quickly. And not long after, I ended up thinking about selling my financial planning practice, which was never on my radar. Guys, I had 6 figures of revenue coming in each and every year before I even woke up, before my feet hit the ground. I had this revenue coming in. So I wasn't about to walk away from 6 figures of residual income. That was a ludicrous thought at the time. But as Order of Man continued to grow, and I was making $1,000 a month, and then $2,000, and then $3,000, I was like, this is becoming more viable. Again, not following my passion, just taking steps at a time. A lot of you guys know this story. We had the Iron Council up to about 80 to 100 members, and I woke up one evening and I thought to myself, it was the middle of the night. I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if I could get a group of guys here locally, or at least bring them in, and we could have, a 3-4 day weekend, and we can do activities, and we can challenge each other and push each other and just have the camaraderie and the accountability and have some fun. Well, I wake up the next morning because I had written this down that night before I went back to sleep. And I was still excited about it. So I started doing some research on getting a cabin in the area in southern Utah in which we were. And I found this really cool place. And I remember I called the guy up. He had just bought the cabin, and it was perfect for what we needed. It had a big cabin, and it had individual bunkhouses. And it was perfect for what we needed. So I call the guy up, tell him what I'm doing, and tell him I want to secure the property for the weekend. And I was going to put a sizable deposit down. He said, great, here's how much it'll cost, and this will reserve your spot for the next couple of months. And I said, great. So here's what we're going to do. So I wired him the money or whatever I did at the point. And we get about 3 weeks out from this event because I was all hopped up on this. And not a single person had signed up. Not a single one. No one. As in nobody paid me any money. And I just remember thinking, man, what did you do? So I call this guy up who owns the property and said, look, I don't have anybody signed up. He's like, no one? I said, yeah, no one. I have nobody signed up. And he says, man, that's too bad. Well, you're going to lose your deposit. That was his response. And I said, hold on. Will you work with me? Well, he had just, like I said, he had just bought the property. So he's trying to build it up and trying to build it into this like destination Airbnb spot. And he says, yeah, I'll work with you. And I said, what I'd like to do is just bump this out, 60, 90 days, and you keep my deposit, but will you apply it to an event that I do in 60 to 90 days? And he said, yeah, we're going to be in the season at that point, so it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but yes, I will apply your deposit towards that event. I went back to the drawing board. I identified a selling proposition. I learned a little bit better how to market this thing, and I went to work, and I filled that second event up with 20 guys. We call ourselves the Terrible 20. In fact, I still got a big blown up picture of the 20 guys who first came to our event, 19 other guys and myself. And I've got that picture in the barn to pay homage to the 20 guys who believed in me when they didn't have to. Guys, I didn't know it was going to go that direction. So we continue to build the Iron Council. We continue to build out this event. We do other events. And there's so many wonderful opportunities that have presented themselves over the past 5 years that, quite frankly, I never would have imagined or even taken a step into if I was out there looking for my passion. I didn't know that my passion was to equip you, the men who are listening, with the tools and resources and conversations that you need to thrive as husbands and fathers and leaders within your homes and communities and business owners and employees and all of the things that you're doing. I didn't know that was my passion. I didn't even know that was an option. So if I was out there searching for my passion, it's likely that I would have continued in my financial planning practice. Well, things got so busy with Order of Man that I eventually reached out to a friend of mine and I said, this is a gentleman that I got into the business, the financial planning business at the same time as me. And I said, hey, look, Greg, I'm really interested in selling my financial planning practice. Would you be interested in buying it? And he said, yes, I would be interested in buying it. And so him and I had multiple conversations and discussions, and we worked out the negotiations and the selling price and everything else. And I ended up selling my financial planning practice. And this was about 2 years, roughly, maybe a little longer, into what we were doing with Order of Man. And since that day, I've been full-time with Order of Man. People ask me that all the time. What's your other job? This is my only job. When people ask me what I do, I go to the convenience store and somebody asks, I bump into somebody and they say, what do you do? And it's hard for me to answer because, if I say a podcaster, most people think, okay, well, what's your real job? This is my real job. And since then, a lot of you guys know because you've been listening for a certain amount of time, my wife and I have moved our children here to Maine. We bought a beautiful property. We've got a big barn attached so we can run our events here. I'm very excited about what we're doing. Now, guys, I don't share this story with you to brag about what we're doing or how my story has went. I'm not sharing it for that reason. I'm sharing it because I want you to know that you never know what your life is going to look like if you're out there just wandering around in the forest, wondering when your passion is going to hit you like a ton of bricks. Guys, it isn't going to work like that. You need to take the first step. If you're interested in becoming a musician, well, then you got to pick up a guitar. If you're interested in selling your paintings, we've got a guy that's connected with us. In fact, I met him in my financial planning practice. His name is Trent, and he's a dentist now, but he's always wanted to paint. And so he's learned how to paint. He bought a canvas, he bought some oils, and he bought a brush, and he learned, self-taught, how to do this. Photography, hunting, firearms training, jiu-jitsu. Look, whatever sounds even remotely interesting to you, you can find a way to make this work. But you have to take a step into the unknown, into something that you're just even remotely curious about. So I'm going to reiterate with this, guys. If you're saying to yourself, how do I find my passion? How do I find something I'm just really excited about? Develop it. Articulate it. Unpack it. Take a step into the unknown. Take a step into something you're interested in. And if you like it, take the second step. And then the third and the fourth and the 10th and the 100th and the 1000th. And if you realize along the way that, I'm not as excited as I thought I would be about this. Okay, well, you aren't any worse off. You explored it. And guys will say, well, man, I just don't want to waste all that time. There is no wasted time. Let me go back to my original podcast, Wealth Anatomy, when I was doing my financial planning practice. It'd be easy for me. In fact, I've had this thought. I wasted all that time. I wasted 6 months or whatever it was doing this podcast, 20 episodes, only to throw in the towel. So initially I thought I was a quitter. I thought I was a loser. You just wasted all that time. You could have been doing something else, and instead you did this, and now you're just throwing in the towel. Well, guess what? It wasn't wasted time, because I cut my teeth in the podcasting world with another podcast that wasn't nearly as successful as this one, but that's where I learned. That's how I learned to ask questions. That's how I got the first 20 episodes under my belt, so I didn't feel like a total dork and a loser as I was continuing to have conversations with people that I really admired and respected. I remember my first conversation with Jocko Willink. That was my first real conversation where I was very, very nervous and very intimidated by the guest that I was having on. And it's still up. I don't know that I would encourage you to listen to that first episode. But since then, we've done 2 or 3 other podcasts, and they continually get better because I'm willing to take the next step and the next step and the next step. Now, people will sometimes ask me, Ryan, what's next? What do you envision for Order of Man? Guys, I don't know. I know I'm fully invested in this thing. I know this is something that's exciting to me. It's something that engages me. Frankly, it is my passion at this point. I would have known that before, but I do now. But I don't know. There might be some new technology or new opportunity or new thing that arises and comes up where I'm like, that sounds interesting. I'm going to try that. And that's what I want you to do. I don't want you to solve all of the world's problems. I don't want you to find your passion. I don't want you to look for the heavens to part and the angels to sing hallelujah, like I was talking about earlier. That's not what I want you to look for. In my experience, what I found is that you can articulate and define your passion over time. You can be passionate about what you're currently doing, whatever that is, and you can look for the next step. So guys, I'm going to leave you with this. Don't follow your passion. It's not helpful. It doesn't serve you. Instead, follow your interests. Follow your curiosity. And I think if you do that enough and you string your actions and your thoughts together enough and you compound it over long and sustained periods of time, you're going to look back in 4 to 5 years, as I am now, with hope and optimism and excitement about what you've created through repetitive steps. That's all it is. It's not leaps. It's just steps. One step, then the next step, then the next step. And before you know it, you look back and think, how in the world did I get here? You got here because you did the work. Not because you tripped upon something, not because something hit you like a ton of bricks. No, because you did the work. Think about that, guys. Ponder on that, especially if you're like, how do I find my passion? I hope this gives you a new way to look at it, a different perspective, something to consider, and it serves you well, and that more of you, especially in the wake of what we're dealing with in society right now. Some of you guys are out of work. A lot of you guys are going through divorces and separations. There's civil unrest. I mean, it's a very weird time. 2020 is weird. But in spite of all that, it's been very good for what we've done. And I think it can be good for you if you take this moment to improve yourself, not to just hope that something stumbles into your lap. All right, guys, that's all I've got. I'll be back to next week. I was going to say tomorrow, but next week for another interview and for Ask Me Anything. That's the best advice I could give you on the following the passion thing. It's not about following your passion. It's about following an interest or a curiosity and just seeing where it takes you, having some faith that it could take you to a great place. And if it doesn't, you pivot. And that's easy enough to do. All right, guys, get out there. Take action on that one thing that you're interested in and become the man you are meant to be.